Now, without any further delay, I'd like to hand today's Academy Live webcast, Building a Windows Azure Practice Using the Partner Ecosystem, the Kentico CMS story, over to your first presenter, Tom Robbins. Tom, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Carly, and thanks everyone, and sorry about any delay that we had. Just by way of quick introduction, my name is Tom Robbins. I'm with Kentico CMS. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we worked closely with our partner in delivering Kentico CMS as both an on-prem as well as in the cloud solution. And I think it might be good to start with a quick introduction about Kentico CMS. We've been in business about 6 years. We currently have about 6,000 active websites in 84 countries. We are completely a .NET-based solution being built entirely in the .NET framework on top of SQL Server. We deliver with approximately 34 modules out of the box, everything from basic page management services up to e-commerce. Our goal is to deliver a single application that allows you to install Kentico either on-premise or in the clouds, and we've actually succeeded in doing that with the help of our partners like BitWizards. I think it's important to understand that Kentico is a completely partner-driven company. It's a very important part of our culture and how we see our business growing. We have approximately 1,200 partners worldwide with a very limited set, about 150 or so that are considered gold partners, and I'm really happy that BitWizards, who is probably our premier gold partner, has worked closely with us on this moving forward. So without further ado, BitWizards has not only a Kentico gold partner, but they've achieved our recent Azure competency, so being skilled not only in on-premise delivery work for Kentico as well as in the cloud delivery work. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Vince, who's going to tell you a little bit about BitWizards. Vince? Vince, you there?
Hi, this is Vince Mayfield. I'm CEO of BitWizards and Senior Software Engineer. Thanks, Tom, for that great introduction, and thank you everyone for attending today. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Tell you a little bit about BitWizards. We create innovative software solutions that solve business problems, and we do that so that we can deliver value to our clients and make them more profitable and efficient. We've been in business since 2000, and we're located in the sunny panhandle of Florida in Fort Walton Beach, and we do project-based software engineering. All of our developers are degreed and certified. They're actually on staff in our building here in Fort Walton Beach. Some of our core business areas are software development, software integration, web design, e-commerce, and graphic design. We've won a number of awards. In 2009 and 2010, we were Inc. Magazine's, one of Inc. Magazine's top 5,000 fastest growing companies. Our web designs have won Addy Awards. And in 2011, we were one of Florida's top companies to watch. And in 2010, and 2011, we were Florida Trend Magazine's best places to work for. As Tom mentioned, we are a Kentico Gold Partner. We've been working with Kentico since 2004, and we are also now a Microsoft Managed Gold Partner. We have gold competencies in software development, application integration, and digital marketing. And we also have silver competencies in web development, data platform, portals and collaboration, and content management. I want to talk to you first a little bit about, I'm going to kind of tell things kind of like a story. Start out, BitWizards provides hosting services for some of our high-end customers. It's not our main business focus, but we realize that some of the clients may not have the resources on site to manage a particular system that we build. So we host line of business applications for some of our clients on a private rack at a national data center. It's basically infrastructure as a service offering, but it's a little bit more than that in that it's more like managed application hosting. We started looking to the cloud to expand our development knowledge and our offerings to our customers. for a company like ours, and for a lot of other companies out there, there's a lot of reasons why the cloud might be the right answer. For example, some of the companies we work with, we see startup companies, and they may have a great new product, but they don't have the capital spend setting up a whole IT infrastructure. And investing in the cloud can be a great solution because pay-per-use billing model that Windows Azure offers, it gives them the resources they need as they need them. In our own hosting service, there's a significant cost for us in terms of maintaining and managing those servers, and it kind of takes us away from our core function, which is software development and web development and integration. And when we want to scale outwards and upwards, we have to invest in leasing additional servers, and a lot of that work falls on us to get done. And so for that reason, we've been looking at possibly moving over to the cloud. Let's see. As a Microsoft managed Gold partner, we work closely with our corporate accounts team, our partner account manager, and our partner technical advisor. And in talking with them, we felt that Windows Azure was a natural choice for the type of custom software development and integration that we do. We usually develop for the Microsoft platform, and we trust that platform and the technology stack, and we do integration with other systems as necessary, but we find that the development's a lot easier, quicker, and more cost-effective when all the pieces come from the same vendor. I want to talk a little bit about, as you know, being a Microsoft Gold partner or a Microsoft partner in general, there's a lot of ability to leverage that partner ecosystem. And I think understanding that ecosystem is really important. If you look at the chart that I have up here, you know, and I'm kind of mapped it out in terms of the Azure practice that we've been working to develop. You've got BitWizards, who's an application development and systems integrator. You've got Kentico, who's an independent software vendor, and both of us are Gold partners. And then you have, at Microsoft, you have the product team. So you have the Windows Azure product team that is looking to develop the product and now has the responsibility to market and get the word out about that product. And then over in the developer evangelist space, you have those folks that are trying to get out there to the developers, and specifically for a custom app or ISV or systems integrator, that's very important to them because their link with the developer evangelist community is helpful because you get the opportunity to see the tools and things that are coming down the pike and get to see what kind of things that people are delivering. But then in the center section there is the corporate accounts, and you have the PAM and the PTA, and their responsibility is to maintain that relationship with the partners. And in addition to that, they also have the sales team for the small business and the mid-market as well as the enterprise. And their job is to kind of bridge that together. And one of the key portions of this story is that all of these elements came together. And for those partners out there, I would like to say to you that there are a huge amount of resources to develop any line of business or practice around Microsoft technologies. You've got to spend the time to develop that relationship. And you've got to understand what the different motivations are of the different groups in order to be successful. You know, in the Microsoft side, you know, they're in the business of selling SKUs and selling product. And as a partner, our job is to take those SKUs and those products and develop them into solutions and deliver them to the customer so that we're able to deliver value both from the Microsoft side and as a partner. And so our story here, and I'd like to say it's about people collaborating and the relationships. And at Kentico, we have Peter Pallas, who's the CEO, and Tom Robbins, who's the Chief Product Evangelist. At BitWizards, myself and Brian Soltis, the Senior Software Engineer. And then in the Microsoft Greater Southeast region, which is our area, we have Jason Jones, who's our partner account manager, James Como, who's our partner technical advisor, Dan Sandlin, who's the Azure product specialist and part of the Azure team, and Joe Healy, who's the Southeast region developer evangelist. Those are headed up by Mike Ward, who's the Greater Southeast region partner and sales manager, and then ultimately with Phil Sorchin, who is the corporate vice president. Our Azure journey started with our PAM and our PTA. We work very closely with Jason and James. In fact, we're supposed to meet once a month, but we actually talk much more frequently. And it started back in October, November time frame when they were talking to us and kind of telling us about Azure. As I mentioned before, we've been looking to the cloud, but we tend to kind of wait a little bit. We want to be at the tip of the spear, but we don't want to really be on the bleeding edge. And so they started to encourage us and say, hey, there's some value out there. And at the same time, we worked with our developer evangelist because we sponsor the GulfCoast.net users group. And Joe Healy talked to us and started to communicate some of that value about Azure and how the tool set could be easily leveraged with the tools that we already had. And so it really got us to start to think. And because of that, Jason and James, talking with us on a regular basis, they told us about Azure University, which was held up in Atlanta and then in other places around the country. And what was really unique about this is that they had actually thought about and considered our business model and what we did and how it applied to Windows Azure. And they explained to us how that could help us in our business and deliver better value for our customers. So we agreed to go out to Windows Azure University. I actually went up and attended, and it was really great because it brought ISVs and systems integrators together. And Jason James actually attended the event with me and a number of other partners. And it was there that we met Dan Sandlin, who was the Azure product specialist. And Dan, talked to us at great length and took the time again to understand our business model and suggested that we might go back and try to come up with a way to do some quick wins and gain some experience with Windows Azure. So we went back, to the table and started to talk a little bit and started to think about, well, we knew that Kentico Software were Gold Partner, that they were looking at Azure enabling their product. And so we love Kentico. It's a great product. It's an enterprise product. It helps position us to get in to do a lot of the things that we want to do as a partner. And so I called up Tom Robbins and Peter Pallas and said, hey guys, we'd like to work with you and help you perfect the Azure implementation of Kentico, and then we'd like to move over our current hosting, managed hosting services, where a number of the applications are on the Kentico platform, and move them over to Windows Azure. And they were all for it. They were like, hey, this is great. So the key that came out of this is that we came back together as a group, both BitWizards, Kentico, and Microsoft, and talked about how we could collaborate and help us develop a practice, help Kentico Azure enable their product, and then in the end, ultimately, to deliver value to our customers out there. And so we went from there and formulated basically our plan. Initially in our plan, what we decided to do was to work on defining the business model. In a typical, hosting or managed hosting environment, we have a fixed cost for the resources, and then we bill on an hourly basis for our services. And turning to a consumption model might have an impact to our customers, but we also had to kind of wrap our heads around the Microsoft process in terms of billing in Windows Azure and really get in and dig in and understand that. And so we started saying, okay, we're going to start with some very simple sites. We're going to move from the simple to the complex. And our goal was to initially migrate 3 sites to Windows Azure, and then over the course of a year, we wanted to migrate 30 more that had increasing complexity. Some of those being based on Kentico, and some of those being typical ASP.NET applications. So we had to move more from an infrastructure as a service model to a platform as a service model. And the initial plan, as I talked about, was to migrate 3, but the first thing was setting up our Azure accounts. And so we went in and we talked with Dan Sandlin, and Dan actually sat down and walked us through the entire process of standing it up, and kind of coached us on what were the pitfalls and what types of things that we needed to think about as we tied this to our business. As I mentioned, we moved from the simple to the complex, and we wanted to build our experience based on successive implementations. We do an iterative approach to migration. We migrate, configure, test, and then deploy. We had decided after talking with Joe Healy, the developer evangelist, and with Dan Sandlin and some of the folks on the Azure team, that we would use the SQL Azure Migration Wizard, and that we would use elements of the Windows Azure SDK. So one of the things that we needed to really think about was in Kentico can be configured in 2 ways. One way is that that you can host all of your websites in a single Kentico instance, a single installation of Kentico. That's not exactly our model, because the type of customers that we have, they may stay with us and host, or they may eventually move the application on-premise. So what we do is we separate it. So we have a separate Kentico instance and a separate database for each instance. And so because of that, we knew that we were going to have one of the 1 gigabyte SQL Azure databases, that we were going to have Azure storage accounts to store for blob storage. And in our initial instance, we wanted to use small Azure instances. And the reason we wanted to do that was we were concerned about the cost in a consumption-based model. To be honest, in our hosting environment, we really didn't know exactly how much resources all of our different customers were utilizing. You know, basically they pay a fixed cost, and you know, we really don't have to manage it that close. But in this model, we'd have to manage it a little closer. We decided we would use small instances. We knew that we had SSL integration to configure for multiple types of endpoints. We wanted to minimize the cost during our exploration, because we didn't want to have any cost to our customers when we went and did this. We were going to basically, this was going to be an investment on our part, and we didn't want this to impact our customers in any way as we did it. So that was basically our plan, and at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Soltis, who's a senior software engineer with BitWizards, and he's going to walk you through our implementation.
Thank you very much, Vince. Good afternoon, everyone. As Vince said, my name is Brian Soltis, and I'm a senior software engineer at BitWizards, and I basically head up the Azure development and the migration of our applications to Windows Azure. In the process of the implementation, I tried to adhere to the planning that we had set forth on, understanding that it would require a significant amount of collaboration between myself, Kentico, and Microsoft. And so during the process, I needed to, I guess, gear up and to get all my tools ready to go for what I was going to do. And the very first step in that was actually just the planning of it, because I recognized that not only were we diving into a new technology and a new hosting environment, but we were also looking at a possible new business model, and we needed to figure out and plan for how we were going to develop and maintain applications with this new platform. So Microsoft has provided a number of tools: the Windows Azure SDK, the SQL Azure Migration Wizard, and additionally there are some third-party tools for interacting with the Windows Azure storage accounts. I had to acquire all those tools and familiarize myself with them so that I understood what they did and how I can leverage their functionality in the process. at Kentico, they knew that they wanted to migrate their applications to Windows Azure as well. So they allocated specific resources within their company, namely Dominic Pinter is their lead Azure developer. Dominic and I had many discussions over several weeks as we both helped perfect the Kentico application to be ready for Windows Azure, as well as the implementation of Kentico CMS within that new platform. I also worked very closely with Dan Sandlin and Martin Pichardo, both on the Windows Azure team in Microsoft. They provided a tremendous amount of information to me, assisted me throughout the process, and to reemphasize one of the points Vince made was it really takes a partner reaching out to Microsoft. Microsoft does have many resources and a lot of expertise available, but partners need to know to request that and show the initiative and to put that ball in motion if they want to go down an avenue which will involve exploration and assistance from Microsoft. So the process of actually migrating a Kentico application to Windows Azure is a multifaceted one, and it really starts with the planning and the isolation of what it is you're going to migrate. In the initial project, we decided we were going to start very simple, and I actually chose a site, one of our sites that is one of the most basic Kentico sites that we have, meaning it doesn't use the file system, it doesn't use SSL or anything like that. It's just a very basic implementation of Kentico, but a good representation of its functionality and features. So one of the things that is actually very powerful about the Windows Azure platform is the ability to actually stage your migrations into multiple steps. The very first thing that we actually do is we actually migrate our databases first to SQL Azure. And in doing so, what we can do is we can transfer the data storage for our application to SQL Azure and then update our existing application to use that new data source. So as we prepare the actual application and the source code, the end user is never aware that they're actually connected to a different database. So any changes they make will be propagated once we actually do transfer the actual application. At this point, I'm actually going to jump over and show a little bit of what I'm kind of speaking to so that you understand a little bit more. So in our development, we have a basic site here, and this is one of the original 3 sites that we chose. This site is for the Order of the Dalians. It's a nonprofit site that we did. Again, part of the selection we wanted to do was a low-traffic site, and we host a number of nonprofit sites. So to minimize user impact, we decided to go with one of these simpler ones. And what I did here originally is this site is actually running on one of our development servers, and it's very mimics what we used to have in our production environment. But with SQL Azure, what's really kind of interesting is you can use the SQL Azure Migration Wizard, which basically allows you to connect to a data source, whether that's on-premise or actually in SQL Azure as the source, and it will allow you to connect and script that database, and then you basically execute that script at your destination. So I actually have that database already done, so this is my web config for that mimic hosted environment, and I'm going to refresh that, and you're going to see it's going to take it a moment to rebuild the application because I did modify the web config, but this application will now actually hit SQL Azure directly. And what this does is this enables us to migrate the database ahead of time, then the end user can continue to use the application, and meanwhile we can convert the actual source code to get it ready to be deployed in Windows Azure. Now, the process of migrating a Kentico application to Windows Azure is a multi-step one, meaning by default Kentico projects are website projects within Visual Studio. In order to be compatible with Windows Azure, you do need to migrate those to a web application. The CTO at Kentico, Martin Hitmonic, has provided a very informative and very helpful blog on doing that exact process. So that was the first thing I did, was go through that to prepare my application for it. After my application was already converted within Visual Studio, I used part of the Windows Azure SDK, which provides a new template project, and that's called a Windows Azure project, which is a cloud service. So after creating that cloud service and applying it to my solution, I then can start to configure my solution for being deployed in Windows Azure. So. And during that process, the website is continuing to run in our production environment and hit SQL Azure because the process of actually migrating a Kentico solution from website to web application and then ultimately deployed to Kentico, it can vary depending on the complexity of the site and the makeup and the components that are used within it. But if it's a base site, I was actually able to do this process in about 3 to 4 hours to actually go through and do so. With it being kind of run in tandem, meaning the production environment is still hitting the database, I can actually go through, deploy the site, deploy it into Azure, test it locally, and then come back and update the DNS so that way the user will never really know that anything changed on the back end, which was an imperative thing that we had to adhere to. Is we wanted minimal downtime and minimal disrupting of the traffic and the flow of the site itself and the user's interactivity with it. So within my Visual Studio project, this is where you can actually come in and make your specific adjustments to your application, meaning if you want to run it on a specific instance, how large the instance is, meaning how many resources are allocated within Windows Azure, how many instances you actually want to run of it, meaning how many virtual servers with Windows Azure do you want to use. And that's a point that I want to stress very clearly is Kentico does support running multiple sites within a single Kentico installation. However, at this time, Kentico only supports running a single instance within Windows Azure, meaning you cannot use kind of the web farm technology and the load balancing across multiple servers. Now, that is something Kentico is actively working on and will have ready in the next major release. And you can continue to have multiple sites installed within one Kentico installation. And in doing so, you could actually have a single Kentico Azure instance that would host a number of Kentico sites for you. But within the Visual Studio project is where you can come in and make all your particular configurations, if you have any particular certificates or anything of that nature that you need to install in the application. In our initial development, we wanted to make sure that we had some baseline functionality, obviously the site itself, but also the ability to RDP into those sites. And in order to accommodate that, you have to basically embed a certificate, a self-signed certificate within your application that will then allow you to RDP into that machine once it's finally deployed. And this is just what I'm demonstrating right now, just so you can see. And then you can make up any username that you need to use for your applications. And what that does is that embeds a certificate within your deployment application that will allow you to RDP to your server. Now, to jump over and demonstrate, this is the actual finalized application that's running on the live URL within Windows Azure. And while I'm waiting for that to pull up, as you see, we have a banner at the top just denoting our adaptation and our usage of Windows Azure and the collaboration that we all kind of were successful at doing. The actual application itself is running on an instance that is something I'll talk to here in just a couple moments, which is actually we have several sites running on one instance. But to demonstrate to you the RDP functionality, it's actually very simple once you get the RDP certificate installed there. What Microsoft has done is they've exposed full IIS functionality, and essentially it's a virtual machine that you get to connect to allow you to manage and update this application if needed directly on the machine. So you can actually see the file system and where the site is actually running and the actual application itself. So that was kind of the initial plan that we went through for the process of just kind of migrating that one site. It did take a very large amount of collaboration between myself and Dominic at Kentico, as well as Dan and Martin at Microsoft. But in doing so, we were able to successfully deploy the applications that we set out to do. And if not for that collaboration, we wouldn't have been successful at that project. So it really was the underlying winning component that allowed us to succeed. Now, along the way, we actually encountered a number of technical hurdles that we needed to overcome. Some of them we were able to do immediately, some we had to plan for. Those being the RDP functionality, which required me to acquire the knowledge of how to install the SSL certificates within the site and RDP to it. SSL, as far as if you need secure traffic over 443, that was another hurdle because we had many sites, especially e-commerce sites, that require that secure communication with the server. What do we do about multiple site deployments? How were we going to handle those if we wanted to deploy multiple sites within a single instance? What were we going to do if we needed to interact with the storage account, as many Kentico sites do, using the Smart Search feature, the Media Library, and the Web Analytics, all of which use the file system within the Kentico site itself? How were we going to handle the DNS? Were we going to change our DNS to point directly to the IP that's allocated to our Windows Azure machine? Or were we going to use a CNAME record to point to the unique URL that's created when you create an account? How are we going to deal with Kentico's single instance support? And the amount of time it actually took. Once an application is actually deployed to Windows Azure, in order to update that, if you're using kind of the traditional model of a single application deployed in the instance, it can take 20, 30, 40 minutes to deploy and update to that application. And that was a big concern for us, because if we needed to update a site very quickly, that was going to prohibit us from being able to do so. So that was an additional hurdle. How large were our instances going to need to be? Were we going to need to allocate more resources to these Kentico sites? Or were they going to work okay under the small instance, which is currently the most affordable hosting option? And then there were a number of other internal Azure kind of things in dealing with permissions, caching, resource allocation, and those things. All of these I experienced during the process, and I reached out to a number of resources in order to find the solutions to those. Namely being, I worked very closely with Dominic to try to figure out how they're going to use the storage account. And what they elected to do is they use cloud storage, which basically means they're using the blob storage within Windows Azure and the storage account, and they basically mount a drive directly to your machine, and then that's where they store their file. And what that does is that's a persistent data source at that point. So if that instance were to go away and a new one to be created, that storage account is still loaded into the machine as a drive, and therefore any changes within that file system are maintained as that instance is cycled. In dealing with the multiple site deployment, we actually leveraged some open source code that was provided by Microsoft on CodePlex, which is part of the Windows Azure toolkit, and which basically allows us to have a deployment manager, which one role will sit there and exist on an instance, and then you basically upload zip files to that, and then it will pick it up and set up sites dynamically and quickly, which eliminates the need for us to completely redeploy an application to a server, and in doing so shut down the entire Windows Azure role. We're able to just actually update that one site. It reduces our development time and our update time from 20 to 30 to 40 minutes down to about 5 minutes in doing so. And we're still actually watching the instance size. As of right now, we're actually okay under the small instances, but as we get more complex sites that are more resource intensive, we may actually experience that we have to address those and allocate a larger instance to our Windows Azure instances. So in the end of the project, we actually achieved double the goals that we had for the initial project. We initially wanted to migrate 3 sites. We actually were able to migrate 6 sites into Kentico. And as I mentioned, we have about a 2 to 4 hour turnaround for a site that's currently running our production environment to convert it and deploy it into Windows Azure successfully. It takes about 2 to 4 hours. I worked very closely with Dominic to help him fine-tune and improve the performance and functionality of the Kentico code. And Dominic also used much of my input to put his own development to that, to make sure that Kentico was completely ready and prepared for Windows Azure deployment and capable of maintaining the functionality that users have come to expect with their normal deployment. We worked out many of the kinks, and it basically allowed Kentico to offer a new business model for themselves by saying that they're one of the only CMS products that are available to be run natively within Windows Azure. For BitWizards, we gained a tremendous amount of experience, both with Kentico, in addition to the Windows Azure platform, and then just the collaboration. And we actually learned a good bit about our Microsoft Partner Network and the resources available to us with that. So a tremendous amount of information we were able to obtain. And in doing so, we also established a new business model for ourselves, in which now we can offer Windows Azure hosting to several clients, which is a completely new and an exciting platform for many businesses, especially startup ones that don't have capital to invest in a large infrastructure. We're able to offer them this new service using Windows Azure to do so. And we actually will realign our own hosting costs and our own production systems to more utilize Windows Azure, thereby reducing our own cost and implementation fees by leveraging the power and the functionality of Windows Azure. So basically, everybody wins, because in doing so, with our adoption of Windows Azure and Kentico's adoption of Windows Azure, Microsoft wins as well. They have two successful partners that are running very powerful and capable applications within Windows Azure, and everyone in the process wins, and that's because of that collaboration. Now, actually, to expand on what our initial results are, we actually now have 15 sites running in Windows Azure, all using SQL Azure. We're using stacked instances, meaning we have two Windows Azure deployments. They're each hosting 5 to 6 sites apiece. What that does is that reduces our cost for hosting, and we're basically leveraging more of the resources within Windows Azure, and again, using that Windows Azure Deployment Manager kind of project that we created that allows us to deploy these applications very quickly and manage them much easier as opposed to deploying a single application to a Windows Azure instance. And to stay in line with our ultimate goal, our year-long goal of having all of our applications, we have over half of them already currently migrated to Windows Azure and are actively working on migrating the remaining ones. And in those 15 applications, we have a number of ones that we'd really like to bring a little light to shed a little bit more information to show you all the kind of functionalities and capabilities that are available with Windows Azure. The first one being Postage Inc. It was our first e-commerce site that we deployed to Windows Azure. It has SSL integration into it, has custom shopping carts, custom e-commerce, and what this demonstrates is the ability to expand and use Windows Azure for even more complex sites, not just brochure sites, but functional business line applications. Additionally, we have the Emerald Coast Autism Center. It's one of our nonprofit sites. It's integrated in with PayPal. It has a number of custom media libraries, and it's a very vibrant, colorful site. It's geared at Autistic Children's Learning Center here in the Fort Walton Beach area, and it's a very high-visited site with a tremendous amount of traffic. Again, well-suited for Windows Azure. The ability to expand and accommodate multiple requests at any given time is a phenomenal benefit. The RDF Associates demonstrates how you can actually have social media integration, as well as it's a B2B and a B2C site. It has several entry points into a number of third-party web services, and also includes secure areas for property owners and things of that nature. So again, what we're trying to demonstrate and to show is that it doesn't really matter the complexity of the site. As long as you plan for it appropriately and migrate them efficiently, you actually can host any application within Windows Azure, and it functions very well in that environment. And our last one that we wanted to show was our CD Technical, again, integrated in with the Bullhorn web service, which provides staffing information. It's a B2B site where a number of users will come in, apply for jobs, and it allows seamless integration within Windows Azure itself. Now, in addition to this, we actually had a number of side projects that we were able to spin off into, namely the multi-instance support that's coming into Kentico 6 is something they're actively working on. They're going to change the way their storage account utilization happens within the Kentico product itself. It's going to be much more efficient, and it's going to allow you to have multiple instances. We're using stacked instances to allow multiple deployments within a single Windows Azure instance. And most recently, we developed a Kentico Mobile Manager, which is a Windows Phone 7 application that allows you to actually manage a Windows Azure-based Kentico site. And this is just a small little screenshot of that. It integrates in with the web service running on the machine, on the site itself. And it was developed by BitWizards, and it's currently available in the Windows Phone Marketplace. So I'm going to hand that back off to Vince, and he's going to take care of the wrap-up from here.
Thank you, Brian. I think that one of the points that I just want to hit one more time is that the real story here is the collaboration using the partner ecosystem. You have Kentico Software and ISV, BitWizards, who does app dev and systems integration, and Microsoft, our corporate accounts management team, our PAM, Jason Jones, and our PTA, James Como, Azure product specialist team, Dan Sandlin, and our developer evangelist, and Joe Healy, And ultimately, I think the big thing here is although we developed the practice and Microsoft was able to sell Azure and Kentico is able to sell software licenses of Kentico software in the cloud, but ultimately the customer wins because they get a solution that's robust and a solution that scales. If you're a partner out there and you're looking at developing an Azure practice, it's a great practice for a partner that's a systems integrator or an ISV or that does custom application development. You're going to get to leverage familiar tools, Visual Studio.net, RDP. What you really have to kind of familiarize yourself is the Azure environment. And it removes barriers, and I'm going to kind of talk about that one here in a second, but Windows Azure and SQL Azure there's value internally to partners because in our case, we're going to save 63% over a 3-year period on what our costs are in managing our data center. And so it's a real cost savings to us. And externally to a customer, it gives them that ability to scale horizontally and vertically using the Azure platform. And, we really, when we looked at it, we came back and said, hey, what we really are doing here and what we're really providing to these external customers is instant infrastructure. And that's what I think that Azure boils down to is that you get the power of instant infrastructure. You don't have to worry about that infrastructure. And, when you're an SI or a custom dev shop, oftentimes there are barriers. As I mentioned before, if you have a startup, they have to go out and they've got to get servers, and they may not have the capital to do that. But on the flip side, you may have a large corporate entity that has something like their marketing department, and they want to build an app that does a specific promotion for a period of time. And typically the way that's done, they've got to go out there and they've got to talk to IT, and IT has to go out and requisition capital resources and stand up servers, and they've got to think about the long-term maintenance of those servers. But this way, you can focus right in on developing the business value and the app, and you get it up there, they pay for the resources they need, and then they can take it offline when they're done. So there's a lot of value there. A couple things that I wanted to impart to you. Right now, there is a limited time Windows Azure special offer. It's called the Windows Azure Discovery Pack. If you purchase $6,600 in Azure subscription services over a 6-month period, you get $2,800 in Azure consulting from BitWizards. And in the slide deck, there's a link if you're interested. It is limited time. It's there until June the 1st of 2011. And then also, I want to encourage you to go and check out the power of Kentico software. Kentico has a free download trial version. It allows all of the features of Kentico free for 30 days. You get to test out every detail of Kentico on your own computer, and you get 10 free support tickets by email. And it's really a great product to base your web application on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Robbins, the Chief Product Evangelist for Kentico, and let him wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate it. And as Vincent said, absolutely encourage you to go ahead and download Kentico to try it out. We offer, obviously, the on-premise solution as well as the cloud-based solution, which allows you to either download a package that can install directly. Certainly, we are definitely moving towards another release of Kentico, which will be towards September, October, with our new 6.0 release, which is going to be heavily focused on some performance issues, as Brian was talking about, expanding out some of that instant support within Windows Azure, as well as introducing some additional extensions around things like online marketing. So a couple of things I think as we start winding down, and I know sadly that we're going to go a little bit late. couple of links that I want to point out, and just so you're aware, we are providing all slide decks as they are, so I absolutely encourage everyone to go ahead and download them. We pulled together a set of links that we hope are things that we've mentioned, as well as things that we think would be interesting. Some of the Microsoft case study, as well as the BitWizards case study, some of the things that Brian has actually found as he's done some fantastic work around Kentico, and some of the technical issues behind it, as well as some of the additional links and things that are going on. We are seeing a fair amount of customers interested in the Kentico Mobile Manager, which is a great way to manage your site from a Windows Phone 7 device, as well as kind of the standard list of things you can look on Windows Azure. And then certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot an email over to Kentico. As you saw here, my contact information I gave earlier, which is thomasr@kentico.com, as well as please feel free to follow up, and I encourage everyone to follow up with BitWizards if you're looking at an Azure-based solution. So with that, Vince, if you don't have anything else to add, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Carly. Vince?
Oh, this is great. Thank you very much, Tom. Carly, to you.
All right.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you do have questions and you'd like to submit them, you can do so using the Q&A tool at the top of your screen. Please remember that all questions will be logged from today's session. So if we don't have time to get to all of them, we'll try to follow up with you offline. As a reminder, there is the PowerPoint available today. To access the PowerPoint, please go to the handouts, like 3 sheets of white paper located in the upper right corner of your screen. Also, as a reminder to all attendees, today's recording will be available on demand on the Partner Learning Center for Partners. Customers will receive an email with a link to the recording, and those from Microsoft can access it on Academy Live. In your main viewing area, we have put up our survey. We'd appreciate your feedback on today's presentation. Simply enter your email and click Start to be taken to the survey. Looks like there are no questions in the queue at this time, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and staying on the line. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our presenters as well.
Hey, Carly.
Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is Brian. I don't mean to interrupt you. I did have a question come in. Someone asked about how long does it actually take to migrate an actual application when you actually deploy it? How long does the deployment process? And they asked if I could explain that a little bit more. Just to explain that particular process, what you do is once you add the cloud service to your application, to your project within Visual Studio, you package that all up, and what that does is that kind of creates a very large zip file. And then that zip file, you then upload it into Windows Azure, and what that does is if you're hosting a single instance within one application within the instance, what it will do is it will basically take that role offline, which that takes about, I'd say, somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes for a role to actually shut down. Then it will update that role with your new information, and that can depend. The amount of time that takes depends on the size of the deployment itself. I have seen it take up to about 10, 15 minutes for it actually to upload the entire deployment because of the size of the actual file itself. And then after it does that, then Windows Azure will then pick up your new deployment and then reallocate a role to it, in which it will allocate resources, then it will create the role, and then it will start the role. And that process can take another 3 to 5, maybe 7 minutes, depending on that. So I would say on a typical kind of base Kentico site, maybe you're probably looking at about a 20 to 25 minutes to actually deploy that application if you needed to make an update. Now, to kind of give you a different spin on things, with using the Windows Azure deployment manager that we kind of created, what we do is, what that does is that deploys a single role, and that role just sits there and watches your storage account. So all you really need to do is you take your application and you create a zip file, just the application itself, upload it to your storage account, which may take about 2 to 3 minutes, and then that role will then download it from your storage account, unpack it on the server, and then create a web application based off of that role and set up all your host headers and those things. And that whole process takes about 5 to 6 minutes. So it was definitely an area that we wanted to look at in dealing with actually deploying applications, and we felt that that one was a very important one because it minimizes the amount of time it actually takes to provide an update to our site. So we definitely want to put some effort and some exploration into that particular area, and I would definitely recommend that for many partners to do, because you basically want to use this new platform to make it as beneficial and cost-effective for you, but you also need to minimize downtime and how your users interact with it. So you kind of have to look at all those things together, again, in the planning, and work with the Microsoft team. They can provide a lot of guidance on that, as well as your ISVs such as Kentico.
Thanks, Brian. We actually had another question that came in that says, we're a startup, we don't have enough developers and customers to get the Microsoft certification. We have an app for SharePoint 2010. How would you advise us to use the partner resources of Microsoft? So I'm going to answer, I'll give you my take, and then I'd love for Vince to chime in as well. So just to give you a background, Kentico is a Microsoft Gold partner. We've been working with Microsoft kind of since day one. The biggest thing that I would definitely recommend is to get to know your local folks. I'm not sure what area of the country or the world that you're in, but Microsoft has a variety of local resources available, and Vince had spoken quite a bit around folks like your developer evangelists and some of your partner account teams. These folks are available at everything from your local user groups to local events that may be happening, and I would definitely encourage you to talk with them, as well as to take advantage of some of the online resources that Microsoft provides around partners. So you don't necessarily have to be a Microsoft certified partner, but they offer a kind of entry-level programs that you can get involved with. Vince, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's great, Tom. That's exactly kind of how we did it back when we started up in 2000. We participated in a lot of the local events. Started out with Big Days. We did with some of the different people in the community. And if I were SharePoint for a second, go and attend SharePoint Saturday, SQL Saturday, and get to know who are the keys and the presenters, and oftentimes Microsoft and the developer evangelists will be there, and then you just strike up a conversation and start working with them. Again, it's about that collaboration and talking with them, and again, I want to remind you that it's a two-way street. I know some partners that think that when they engage Microsoft, that Microsoft should just throw everything to them. And the reality is that, in any relationship, it takes work on both sides, and you got to work at it. And it took us a while. We weren't successful in the beginning. It took us a little while to develop that relationship. You want to kind of get a track record of being able to deliver. And but if you keep hitting it and you keep going over and over again, and you start out at that local level, you'll work your way up. There's a great book on developing a partnership with Microsoft. I'll be happy to send it in to Carly. It kind of has, it's kind of a how-to guide on how to do that, and it's very helpful.
I think also to that point, this is Brian again, is Joe Healy, actually our developer evangelist in the Southeast area. He was one of the major factors in us actually developing the Kentico Mobile Manager Windows Phone 7 app. Again, collaborating with him, kind of him notioning that we should probably get into that realm. He thought it would be advantageous for us, and it most certainly was. And but it wasn't without his help that we were able to achieve success in that one. Again, reaching out and using the local Microsoft resources that you have available to you is probably the smoothest and quickest way to success for a partner.
It's typical marketing and sales. It really is. It's about finding out what people's motivations are. The developer evangelist has a motivation of delivering a message to developers, and you understand that that's what their message is, and then you understand that the corporate accounts managers, their jobs are to develop relationships with partners and then to